So after the cherries, the apricots, the peaches and the nectarines, it's time now to pick our plums. Plums are the last of the stone fruits that we pick on the farm. They take almost 4 months to get ready from the time of flowering in March to now picking in mid-July. So most of the plum varieties that we have on the farm are the Japanese varieties of plums, like this one over here. This is the Black Splendor. Now the Black Splendor is an early flowering variety. It flowers early. It exposes itself to the late spring frost, which it is somewhat susceptible to. But if it escapes the frost, it produces a very large, very delicious plum. As you can see, they are battered by the hail, by the way, but apart from the hail, they have a very good color, they have a very good size. This is the kind of plum that we use in various different ways. You can eat it fresh, you can jam it, and you can also pickle it if you pick it when it's still semi-raw. This is one of my favorite plum varieties on the farm. This variety is called the Black Gold. Now this is my favorite because this is a prolific bearer. Last year we had almost as much of a crop load as you see this year. This has been giving us a consistent harvest over the years regardless of the age of the tree. Black Gold, unlike the Black Splendor that we saw earlier, is not yet ready. This is going to be ready maybe in a week or two. Now the other thing about the Black Gold is that unlike the Black Splendor, this is not a very big plum, but we are happy with this variety because it is giving us a consistent crop load year after year. These varieties that we are visiting today, the Black Splendor, the Black Gold, these are the mid-season varieties of plums that we have on the farm. We have already harvested the early harvest varieties of plums, and these were the Red Buttes, the Black Amber and Early Queen. All of these have already been harvested. We started harvesting our plums towards the end of June. This is the mid-July. These are the mid-season varieties of plums that are coming around. And then we will wait for a late harvest varieties like the Pink Jewel, which will be ready to harvest only in September. And this one over here is a variety called the Black Diamond. I don't know why they call it the Black Diamond. It's neither black, neither shines like a diamond. It's still very raw, and this is going to be a plum that we're going to harvest even after the Black Gold. This tree was planted along with the Black Gold almost 3 years ago, but did not give us a harvest last year. This year it's given us what I can call a sample crop, and these plums are really very huge, and they will be ready to harvest in perhaps 2 weeks, if not before. And this tree, planted on a border right next to a seasonal brook, you can hear it gurgling behind me, is this plum tree which we planted almost 5 years ago in 2020, I think it was. And this variety, we don't have a tag on it, but looking at the color of this plum, I'm assuming this is Shirou. Shirou plums have a pale yellow color like these plums have. Shirou is also a Japanese plum, and Shirou in Japanese means light. Now these are obviously light colored. They are not purple, they are not red like the other plums. These are the plums that are pale yellow, and they're very juicy. They need to be very ripe when you pick them. These are going to be ready to harvest in a couple of days, and this one over here is ready. Extremely sweet, very juicy plum. The kind of plum you would eat right off the branch. This year in April, we were battered by the hail, which damaged a lot of our fruits, including the plums. If you see plums like these in the market, are you ever going to buy them? I think not. Even if you're going to buy them, you are not going to be willing to give a good price for them. This even when you know they are organic and chemical free. This is sadly because fruits are bought not for their nutrition value but for their looks. How good a fruit looks determines their value. And this is the reason why the indiscriminate use of pesticides and chemical fertilizers across the world is only going to increase. Did you know that most of the chemical fertilizers used on fruits and vegetables are geared towards making them look a particular way, are geared towards making them look good, are geared towards the aesthetics. And that's simply because those are the fruits consumers demand and buy. Farmers certainly do not enjoy spraying these chemicals. Firstly, these pesticides are super expensive. Secondly, they are a health hazard not only to the end consumer but to the farmers themselves. But as long as the consumers are only going to demand and choose good looking fruits, those are the fruits that the farmer is going to produce. And the indiscriminate use of pesticides is never going to stop. And by the way, these marks on these plums are hail marks. And even though these plums have been grown organically, they are 100% chemical free, they are not market worthy. Because these plums are not good looking, they simply cannot be sold. Now, along with the harvest of our plums, we are going to be harvesting our late harvest variety of apricot, the Pliacot. This is the apricot which you're going to harvest maybe in a week or two from now, because as you can see, this is not yet ripe, and this is an apricot which we're going to harvest towards the end of July. So we started harvesting our apricots towards the beginning of June, and we will end the harvest of apricots towards the end of July with this very late harvest variety of apricot called the Pliacot. This again is a black diamond variety of plum. Its neighbor is this pear. I think it's either the Pakham or the carbon pear, and this has given us a sample for the first time. This is quite small, as you can see, and this is going to be ready for harvest towards maybe the end of September. Now, as you can see, we have interspersed all these stone fruit trees. We don't have a separate block for plums, separate block for pears, separate block for apples. We have interspersed them all. We have the plum tree over here, then we have the pear tree here, then the next one behind me is the cherry tree. We have socially distanced each species from its own kind so that we don't have a monoculture of one kind of tree. Monoculture would mean a very rapid spread of disease, because you've got one kind of trees and they will spread the disease amongst each other. Over here we have created these buffers. This is a buffer, this pear tree is a buffer between the plum tree here and the plum tree down the line. So we have harvested a lot of our peaches already, and this is a nectarine. Nectarine is nothing but a peach without a fuzz. This nectarine is a late harvest variety of nectarine called the stark red, which is going to be ready for harvest maybe in a week or two from now. Now, most of the plum varieties we have on the farm are the Japanese varieties of plums, except two varieties, the Dante and the Stanley. This particular plum variety is the Dante. This is a European plum variety. They are very distinct looking. They are not round shaped, but they are oblong. These are the plums that you dehydrate. You cannot really dehydrate the Japanese varieties of plum because they are very juicy. They got a lot of juice. They have got a lot of water content in them. So it's very difficult to dehydrate the Japanese varieties of plums, but these have a lot of fiber in them, and these are best suited for dehydration, and we're going to dehydrate a lot of these when we harvest them in September. So these European varieties, these prunes, are our late harvest varieties of plums. So while we are going to be picking up plums, the Granny Smiths are still maturing. This is a Granny Smith tree, and this we planted only barely 2 years ago, and this is growing on a dwarfing rootstock called the M9. And this has given us a sample crop this year, and we got about 10 to maybe 15 apples on this. So Granny Smith apples, by the way, are going to be our late harvest varieties of apples. These are going to be harvested towards the end of October or maybe early November. Now, besides the black gold, which is my favorite variety, the other favorite variety that we have on the farm is this variety called the pink jewel. Now, the pink jewel is the largest plum that we have on the farm. Last year we weighed one of our pink jewel plums, and it weighed in at 250 grams, which is almost the size of a mid-sized apple. So these are very large plums, and other advantage I would call it of the pink jewel is that this is a late harvest variety of plum. When we have finished the harvest of all the plums on the farm, we still have the pink jewel to come to for the harvest. This plum is going to be harvested towards the middle of September, the time when we start the harvest of apples. And we also have a sample, the first year sample of a variety called the Angeleno. Now the Angeleno was grafted on a rootstock over here that we had, a plum rootstock that we had, and it has given us this first sample on a farm on this tree. And as you can see, these plums are very raw. So these are also going to be the late harvest varieties of plum. And I'm harvesting over here a heart-shaped plum. This plum is shaped like a heart. It's a very small sized plum compared to the other plums, and the water content of these plums is also not as much compared to the other plums we have on the farm. Last but not least, we have these local plums called the luchas. Now look at them, they grow like grapes. They're very small, they remain tiny, and they're very juicy as well. This year what we're going to do with them is we are going to pickle them. So to pickle any plum, you need to pick them when they are still quite raw. So just like for apricots, cherries, peaches and nectarines, because of these different varieties, we have an extended period of plum picking on a farm. Except that for plums, we have almost about 4 months of plum picking. We start picking the early harvest varieties of plums towards the end of June, and our late harvest variety, the pink jewel and the prunes, we harvest almost towards the end of September. So they do not all come into bearing all at once, but at different times, and we can come into the farm and pick them at our own convenience. And of course, we also have these fruit and berry picking tours. So visitors who visit our farms will have something or the other to pick from the farm whenever they come to the farm. Now, one of the problems that we face with the late harvest varieties of our plums is skin cracking. The skin cracking happens because of the relentless rains in the monsoons. The monsoons, the rains, they tend to open up the skin of the plums, and that leads to a lot of infestation of all kinds of pests and diseases. Apart from that, the late harvest varieties of any fruit that we have, be it the apricots, cherries or the plums, they give us a steady supply of the fruit. And we also have a cafe Khoblu in Shimla, where all this supply goes, and cafes, as you can imagine, requires a steady supply of fruits and veggies. So one of the pests that the monsoon brings and that we have to contend with is the Japanese beetle. The Japanese beetle loves any kind of foliage. It chews on tender leaves as well as ripening fruit. We also have birds, I noticed, feeding on some of our plums, and the Himalayan bulbul particularly, it is a native bird in this part of the world, and it also feeds on the plum. Now the Himalayan bulbul feeds on the plums not out of choice, but because we have destroyed their sources of food and their habitat. Autumn olive, or ghai as we call it locally, was a bush which traditionally lined all our farms, and this bush was the habitat of most of the birds, including the Himalayan bulbul. And Himalayan bulbul particularly fed off these very small berries of the autumn olive and fed off them. And now, because we have destroyed these bushes which lined our farms, these birds have got no choice but come into the farm and feed off whatever we grow over here, the plums, the cherries and the berries.